Hey guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Joseph, and in today's video we're going to further enhance the image that we captured in our previous video. So if you haven't seen that one, you can click the link somewhere in the card or in the description box. I'm going to put it in there, you can check it out. But in today's video we're going to be doing the same thing, just that we're going to be using Photoshop to do that. I've also made a few adjustments here inside Camera Raw because that's where I'm starting from. Shameless plug. So I'm going to be doing everything from start to finish using my workflow actions. I'm also going to be color grading this with my MELANIN skin tone LUTS. So in case you don't have that as well, the link is down below. If you go onto my digital store, there's some freebies on there that you can enjoy as well. Alright, so moving on, now that we are inside Camera Raw, I just want to show you the basic adjustments I have made so far. So the first thing is going to be inside my color profile. Adobe has not been able to release color profiles for the R6 and the R5, so it means that we have to tweak the profiles till we find what actually looks good to our eyes. But I decided to keep it at Adobe Color, and I came down into the calibration and then I made some further enhancements. So you can see in the shadows I made a +8, in the red I brought it down -7, and then I added some saturation to it. In the green I went up +8, and then the saturation I brought it down -8. Inside the blue primary, all I did was add +5 to it. So here's before. As you can see, it's just a subtle change, and then after it just warms it up a little bit. Afterwards, I came into the basic tab, and this is where I made some adjustments. When I shot this image, the white balance, I decided to keep it as it is, which is 5650, and then +14 on magenta. I didn't touch my exposure, but with my contrast, I added a little bit of contrast, and my highlights, I also boosted it as well. Then in my shadows, I darkened it down further, and in the blacks, I made them even darker. Then I came down into dehaze, and then I just added a little bit of dehaze in there, upped my saturation and upped my vibrance as well. So that's all that I did inside the basic tab. Then from there, I came into the color mixer, and this is where we made a lot of changes, right? So if I turn this off, you can see her dress is even green, and then after you can see even the background also shifts a little bit because I wanted the colors to blend just a little bit, especially between her skin tone and the backdrop, so that we can have a lot of separation between that and the outfit that she's wearing. I kind of liked the green in the beginning, but I felt it was looking a little bit too loud, so I decided to pull those colors out, and I did that inside saturation. So you can see the yellows, the greens, aquas and blues have all been moved to -100, except the yellows, which is like -89. So if I just bring the greens up again, you can see that now we're beginning to see the shade appear back in the outfit, but it's very, very subtle. Even though it looks green, you would notice that it's rather in the aquas that you have the strongest effect. So just bringing it down a little bit like this, it feels like the color isn't too strong and it's not totally gone. So what I wanted to do rather was just to, you know, take it all the way out so it becomes like a gray dress. And I think this looks really, really good. I also go down on the greens as well, and I did the same thing in the blues. You can see there's a little bit of blues right in here midsection, and bringing that all the way down to -100, just make sure that everything stays in the same color space. Then inside the hue, I also shifted the greens, the aquas and the blues because I wanted to make sure that they were in the same space so that when I desaturate them, they are all affected the same way. And then inside the luminance, I think you guys saw that before. Alright, so now that we've been able to go through all of these, we're just going to open this image inside Photoshop. So I'm going to click open, and this is going to open the image inside Photoshop, and this is where we're going to add all of the effects that we're looking for. Now that we're inside Photoshop, the first thing I want to do is to crop this image to the size that I want. I know I'm going to be posting this on Instagram mainly, so I'm going to hit C for my crop tool, and I'm going to select the ratio, which is 4:5, because that's the portrait ratio that Instagram absolutely loves. As you can see, it's cropping off certain parts of the image. I don't want that, and luckily because our background is a plain solid color, we can actually just paintbrush this in to fill any excess, right? So what I'll do is just tilt this around till her pose looks straight, and then I'll lift the top up, still bear in mind that the crop ratio is going to be the same. So somewhere around here, and then I'll just bring this down because I want to reveal more of her legs. I like the way I actually shot it in camera, so that is what I want to keep. I also feel like the space on her right is a little bit too much, so I'm just going to move her just a tiny bit. I'm actually going to use my arrow keys for that, somewhere like that. I think this looks good, and I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to apply the crop. Now there are a few things that we still need to get rid of, and that's just going to be filling in the other side. So what I'm going to do is press M on my keyboard, and that's going to select the marquee tool, and this is the marquee tool. I'm using the rectangular marquee tool, right? I'm going to draw around, then I'm going to go to edit, come down to content aware fill, so that Photoshop will be able to fill that entire area with the brown. All right, and then I'm just going to press OK. So now Photoshop is just going to, repeat some of the pixels, and because it's plain, like I said in the beginning, we're not going to have so much of repeating pixels because it's just a plain color. As you can see, it has been able to fill it beautifully, and it also puts it on a brand new layer. So here's before and here's after. All right, I'm going to select back on my background layer, hit M again for my marquee tool, but in this case, because of the white light that is showing in the back, I'm just going to sample with my paintbrush and then just paint that out. And I'll go back to my marquee tool, and then I'm just going to select from outside, come all the way in to somewhere around here, go back to edit, come down to content aware fill, and then we are going to allow Photoshop just to do the same thing again. Awesome. So now you can see we have a plain background. It looks really good, but I'm just going to use my brush tool to fill in certain areas that it missed, just sampling with the Alt key and then painting to fill in those areas. All right, so now this is the crop that we are looking at. I absolutely love it, but we still have a lot of work to do. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is remove any blemishes. All right, and I also like to work organized, so I know what each layer in my image is doing. So in case I need to come back, make corrections or whatever, I can easily do that. So I'm going to group these, hit Command G, and I'm going to name it Edge Fill because that's what I did. I'm going to create a new layer. This is a blank layer where we're going to be doing all our healing work. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in to her face, and luckily she doesn't really have a lot of blemishes, so we won't spend a lot of time here. I'm going to press on Alt, sample, and then just paint. I'm using the healing brush tool. You can hit J for that, and you have a ton of them: spot, healing, patch, but in this case I'm just using the healing brush tool. All right, so just Alt to select a clean area and then paint over the blemish that you want to get rid of.
Scale the world inhales as we go.
All right, so now that we've been able to remove all of the blemishes that are very visible in the image, or at least distracting to my eyes, now you can see we have a much cleaner image. Here's before, here's after. If I zoom into her face, here's before, here's after. I'm gonna come down, and you notice that I also use a healing brush to remove some of the creases in her dress, just to smoothen it out a tiny bit. All right, so now that we've done this, the next thing I have to do is going to be running my frequency separation action and then smoothing out some of the inconsistencies or the tonal variations in the image. All right, so I'm going to go into my action set. I'm going to come down into 16-bit, press play, and the action is going to run. Now I can select the radius that I want. So I'm going to select on here, and then just move around the image a little bit and make sure that it's actually the textures that I am removing from her face. All right, we don't want to blur or select a radius that's going to make the image very, very blurry. So I think somewhere like this, 5.6 is good. I'm going to press OK. And now we can even turn on the helper and then just go about smoothing out any variations. All right, I'm going to open the FS folder, go into the blur copy, hit B for my brush tool, click on it and drag it down to mixer brush. And my settings are the wetness is 40, load 40, mix 20, and flow at 16. Alright, so now that I have done most of the frequency separation, you can see that the image is looking a lot smoother. If I move or zoom into her face, you can see that we have smoothing a lot of the tonal variations, right? It's looking really smooth. What I also like to do, you can see that in the dress as well, I just painted with the mixer brush and we have removed a little bit more of the creases. The idea is not to remove everything, but we're just polishing it up and making it look a little bit smoother. Okay, and that's all I have done. That looks really good. And if you know me, you know that anytime I do my frequency separation, I don't like to keep it at 100%. I always want to bring back some of that original texture or variations back into the image. So I'm just going to reduce the opacity to about 70%, and I think they should be fine. I'll go ahead and delete the FS helper because I don't need it anymore. And the next thing we're going to do is now run our dodge and bend complete set. This is all inside my workflow actions. So if you don't have it, you can click the link down below into my description box. It's going to take you to my website and then you can purchase the workflow actions. All right, so I'm going to press play and this is going to run my dodge and bend complete set. As you can see inside the folder, it comes in with contrast, desat, these are help layers, and then it comes with your dodge and bend layers. On there, we're going to be using a regular brush instead of the mixer brush. So I'm going to hit B for my brush tool, select it, and then just go back and select my brush tool. Another thing I'm going to do is to make sure that my flow is all the way down to about 3%, and then we can start painting on the layer mask attached to the dodge and the bend. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is actually just work on dodging and also make sure that your brush is set to white so that when you're painting on the black mask, it reveals the dodging or the brightening effect on the select areas that you're painting. Alright, so I'm going to make my brush a little smaller, and now I'll just start painting over areas that are too dark for where they are present, and then just try and lift them up or brighten it so that it matches the surrounding areas. That's all dodging and bending is about. If you find an area that is, let's say, too dark for where it is, then you can just lighten it up. If you find an area that is too bright for where it is, then you darken it down, and doing that is what is going to help make your images look a lot smoother. Alright, so this was just a little dodge and bend that I've done. I think I missed this area. I'm going to rotate it around, go back into my burn, and I just want to darken this area down a bit. I feel like it's out of place. So I'm just burning it in so that everything just looks really smooth and nice. Yeah, I think this looks good. Before, after. Yep. Alright, so now zooming back out, this is what we have. You can see I'm not doing anything too intense. This is before and this is after. Now we're going to run another dodge and bend, and over here I'm just going to add more shape or depth to the image. So I'm going to come back into my actions and I'm going to select the burn, I'm going to select the dodge, and I'm just going to hit play. So selecting both of them actually just allows you to run the actions at the same time. I'm going to start off with my dodge, hit B for my brush tool, and now anywhere that there is light, I'm going to paint over that existing light. And I'll do the same with the burn. Anywhere that is dark, I'm just going to darken that out. Alright, and the idea again is not really to do too much. Just try and be as subtle as possible, because I feel retouchers, we are like ninjas, right? We don't want people to be able to tell our presence anywhere, you know. So if you're able to retouch an image and it looks good and people can't really see exactly what you've done, then it means that you've done a good job. Because some images, you'd see them and know that no, this is a post-processed image. This person looks too polished, you know. Unless that's the look you're going for, then absolutely. But in general, or for me personally, I don't like it when my retouching is very, very obvious. Alright, so this is what we've done as well with the dodging. So before and after, you can see it's lifting up certain areas. I'll go into burn, and then anywhere that is dark, I'll just start darkening those areas down some more. And this is what helps. If you do this well, this is what can give your images that three-dimensional pop that you would typically be looking for in your images. All right. Okay, so I'm going to group the dodge and bend, and I'm just going to call this global dodge and bend. All right, so here's before and after. You can see that now she's popping off the backdrop a lot more, but I'm going to reduce the opacity because I don't want it to be too strong. And even with my initial dodge and bend, I'm still going to reduce the opacity to about 83. So these are things that I personally like to do. Anytime I'm done with something, I always just bring down the opacity just because I don't want it to be extremely visible. All right, so before we even proceed, let's just do a little before and after of everything and then see what we've been able to do so far. So starting off, I initially filled the edges, right? And then I, removed the blemishes that were immediately visible to me. Then I ran my frequency separation action to smoothing out the, the tonal variations a little bit. Then I ran my first level of dodge and bend to smoothing that out even further. Then I went into the global, where now we're just making the image pop a lot more. All right, so I feel we just now need to work on our backdrop, and this is where all of the magic truly is going to happen. But before I do that, the next thing I want to do is just smoothing out some of the colors in her skin. All right, so what I'm going to do is go back into my actions, select on color match, press play, and this is going to create a color matching layer where all you have to do is, because it selects a brush for you, all you have to do is sample a color that you like, that you want to see present throughout the entirety of the image. And then now all you do is, with a higher flow, just start painting on that layer. So you'd see that it will begin to blend or shift colors towards the color that you have selected. So now you can see that we are matching the skin tones. It's beginning to look a lot more uniform. And all I'm doing is using the brush that is selected for me to paint over the entire area. So anywhere my brush passes is going to shift towards the color that I initially selected. And you can see I selected the color just once, and I'm just running through the entire image. Just trying to be careful. Maybe not too careful, because I know the backdrop is also quite close to her skin tone. But then again, just make sure you don't go too overboard. All right, because then if you do and people zoom into your images, they'll be able to tell that you have created something, and that is what separates like good retouchers from the rest, because they always try and have a very clean work. You can see as I got close to the edge, I decided to zoom in so that I can have more control over the area that I'm painting, just like that. Okay, this looks fairly good. I'll just come down to her legs or her thighs, and I'm also going to paint over those. Once I'm done, here's before and after. You can see that now it's looking a little bit more uniform. I'll just still bring the opacity down some more. Initially it was 39. I'm just bringing it down to about 20. All right, so now that we have this out of the way, in the beginning, initially I showed you guys this textured background. We need to bring that in and then just try and blend it in to work with our portrait or our image. All right, so in order to do that, what I want to do is just select everything that I have done so far. I'm going to convert it into a smart object. So what this is going to do is contain all of the individual layers that I have created into one single layer, but because it's a smart object, I can still go back and then make adjustments if I need to, or I can later on expand this smart object, and then it's going to reveal all of those layers if I want to make any adjustments. All right, so you can see we have a new layer here which contains everything that we've done so far, and we can actually unpack this and it's going to reveal all of the layers that are currently hidden in there. I did this because I just want to be able to play with my subject without necessarily having like too many layers. So this is another way of staying organized. I do this sometimes, but not all of the time. All right, so now what I need to do is select my subject so that we can play with our backdrop. And there's an easy way of doing this. What I'm going to do is hit Shift Option Command and E. This is just going to create a stamp visible layer of everything that we've done so far. So we're not going to be working directly on our smart object. All right. So over here, what I'm going to do is hit W, and this is going to allow me to select subject or select and mask. And what I want to do, because Photoshop is really clever these days, I'm just going to select subject, and it's going to do a very decent job at selecting my subject out of the backdrop. If I hit Q,